Hey, Dharma Drops listeners, it's your friendly neighborhood yoga teacher, Rebecca Warfield. And before you get going into this super fun podcast episode that I'm really excited about, do me one quick little favor and look down to your phone, and where you see the option to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast, please do so. The more you rate and review and subscribe to the podcast, the more it moves up the charts. And really, this podcast cannot be a success without your support. And it already is an amazing success. There's now downloads in at least 33 countries. I counted yesterday, so who knows what's happened today. But in any case, if you haven't done so already, please rate the podcast and take 2 seconds, just leave a little review like, "This lady's crazy, love her," or whatever it is you have to say. And then don't forget to subscribe. And then enjoy the episode. This is Dharma Drops with your host, Rebecca Warfield. This podcast is a little bit about yoga, a little bit about life, and a little bit about whatever. And just as a warning, this podcast is unscripted, so that means I might regret a few things that I say. But hey, maybe I'll say some pretty awesome stuff too. Remember, these are musings, not truths. Buckle up, giddy up, because here we go. So Danny told me that we were going to get along really well because you're the only person who says fuck as much as me.
Yes. Yep. That's what I love. So then I was like, oh, I know. I can just say anything to her.
Anything you want. So we're here on Dharma Drops podcast, and I'm your host, Rebecca Warfield, and I am here with Gaby Merediz from Make Your Perfect. And we're here to say the fuck word a lot today.
Yay. Although, you know what? We went on vacation, and I think my kids have now surpassed both of us in how much they say fuck, which is not good. Yeah.
So you're the second person on this podcast to talk about their children saying fuck. It's interesting. I don't have children, so I don't know anything about kids and like bad language.
I think I started to swear more after I had kids, and when they were really little, they actually didn't like copy it. I don't know. It wasn't like a taboo thing to say, so they never walked around going like fuck, like how some kids will once they hear it. Sure. But, and so now, though, that they're 8 and 10, they are saying it like a little too much. But, like, they drop stuff and they're like, motherfucker, you know?
My parents would have lost their marbles. So I grew up in a pretty waspy household. You know, like, we were about as a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant as it gets. I always joke because I'm Rebecca Jane, my sister's Anne Elizabeth, my brother's John Christopher. It doesn't get any whiter than that.
Where? You said you were from I heard you say
Mid-Atlantic. Yeah, so I'm from Western Maryland, from a small town called Hagerstown.
Like, who's from Maryland? You know?
I don't know. Actually, there's a lot of people in Maryland. It's a small state with a lot of people. And for anyone who's in Maryland listening, in my home state, I'm sorry for saying this, but Hagerstown fucking sucks. I graduated high school, and as soon as I could get out of there, I was gone, and I have not been back much since then.
But so why did you start saying fuck? So your parents
So don't ask me. I remember the first cuss word I said. The first cuss word I said was in middle school. What up, Smithsburg High School? Middle school. Middle school. And I remember saying the word damn it, and I felt really bad.
Really?
Yeah, I felt really guilty, but that's what it was. So being a wasp or a former wasp, whatever. My mom overheard me on the phone when I was in high school, and I said, Jesus Christ. And she lost her marbles.
Oh, see, that's so funny. I didn't even know that was not okay to say until I moved down south.
Where are you
I'm
from?
Connecticut, and it's super there's a lot of like Catholics there, but I didn't know it was a bad thing to say. My parents did not allow me to swear.
Yeah.
But I didn't know Jesus Christ was bad until I moved down here, or like, oh my God, or anything like that. But my parents speak Spanish. I mean, I do too, but they always swore in Spanish, and I didn't know until I was in high school that they were actually swearing. I was like, I thought it was just like another word that you say in Spanish.
There's a lot of things in the South that I wasn't prepared for. Like when I moved down here and someone was like, oh, you're a Yank. And I was like,
a Yank?
A what?
I haven't even heard a Yank.
And they were like, yeah, a Yankee. And I was like, for real? Like, you mean that? Like, for real? For real? Yeah. You know, it's really interesting. So anyways, guys, we're here to say the F word a lot, but also we're here to talk about some pretty awesome stuff today. So Gaby, you are the, should I say founder, the creator, the owner of Make Your Perfect. What's the right word?
Ooh, creator. I always have trouble coming up with creator.
I feel like we should call you like a creatrix.
I like creatrix.
Yeah,
yes.
creatrix of Make Your Perfect. And so this is generally a yoga podcast. Before we get into Make Your Perfect, are you a yogi?
Well, actually, not very much.
That's cool. That's even better.
Yeah. All my life, it always was the thing that was like no, I wasn't going to burn enough calories to be like worth it. So if I was going to exercise, like I have to go out and like just fucking like run really hard.
I ran last night for the first time in months. I call it wogging. I was walking and jogging.
Yeah. I call it running, even though I'm really just like jogging as slower than most people walk. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally understand.
Walk.
So yoga wasn't enough exercise.
No, but so more recently, like in my 30s, I started to do it more often. And I've gone through phases where I totally love it for whatever reason, like whether it's like for my body, but it's not. It's usually like more for my mind.
Yeah.
I'm not I am not the kind of person who likes to be with other people.
Oh.
So like taking classes was always really hard for me. And I went to my first class probably like 5 years ago only.
Interesting. I go back and forth with that. I started practicing regularly in classes, and then for like pretty much the last year, I practice almost solely at home. And then just a few weeks ago, I was like, I really want to be with some people. Like I want to go back to my yoga community, so I've been practicing at a studio,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. I go back and forth. I think like everything in my life, I go back and forth with it. I've never been super into it or super, I guess, knowledgeable about it. I did in college. I think it was like the summer after my freshman or sophomore year of college. I got this like fat yoga book from the library. And like as I was reading it, I got really into like the whole philosophy of yoga. And so I ended up like really never doing yoga.
That's yoga. You know what I mean? Like yoga doesn't have to be asana.
Interesting.
It's so funny that you said you got a book from the library. So for those of you who are listening, Gabby and I just met.
Like in my driveway 5 minutes ago.
We just met, and now we're BFF. I teach at UNC Wilmington. I teach English. I don't know if you know that about me.
I think I did read that.
There's like a lot of changes that happen with young people that feel relatively quick. So when I first started teaching English 11 years ago, the library was like a normal place you would go to get information. And then maybe 2 years ago, one of my students I required them to have a library book, like a source in their research paper, just so they had the experience of like holding a book.
Oh my God.
And this kid was like, well, how do you check it out? And I was like, well, you go get the book. And then you like check it out. And he was like, but what do you do? And I was like, wait, time out. I said, how many of you have like checked a physical book out of the library? And out of 25 students, just a few raised their hand because they're they're digital human beings. You know what I mean? They live in this digital world. And so they were all really familiar with like getting like electronic articles and electronic books and stuff like that from the library database. But almost none of them had actually been to the library.
Oh my God. Whereas when I went to the library, I was more comfortable with like the drawers with the Dewey Decimal System.
Oh, Dewey Decimal!
Right? And I was nervous when like we had to use the database like to find the journalistic sources. And I was like, this is too confusing. I don't understand why I am like going on a computer and where all this stuff, why is it on the computer? Like, and microfiche, remember? Like that was a lot of technology for me to handle back in the day.
So I don't know if you want to disclose this. How old are you?
I am 40.
40. So I'll be 37 this year. So we're like of the same generation.
Yes, the library generation.
The library generation where we had real books in real hands with little Dewey Decimal cards.
Well, and the libraries were also cool. Like in my college, the library was like beautiful.
Where'd you go to school?
Vanderbilt in
Oh
Tennessee.
my gosh, yeah. I've been looking at one of their doctoral programs actually. We'll see. That's like years down the road, but maybe.
Check out their library. Library. It's like haunted and beautiful, and you would go study in these nooks. Every library like has a thing.
Yeah.
Characteristic. Anyway.
I actually went to UNC Wilmington. I graduated from here. Yeah. So I finished my last 2 years at UNCW, and then I stayed for grad school.
Gosh, now you teach there.
Mm-hmm. I sure do. I wasn't planning on it, but 2008 happened. And the economy crashed, and they were like, "Hey, you want a job?" I'm like, "Fuck yeah."
Cool.
Yeah.
And so you've been doing it now for 11 years.
Yeah, I was full time for a number of years, but I'm part time now because life is awesome part time because I get to like travel around and talk to cool people.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, can you tell us a little bit about Make Your Perfect?
Yes. So what it is basically I'm an artist. And I inspire women to live in their full, real, authentic expression. Mm-hmm. And so Make Your Perfect started, it's like such a long story, but So I was always an artist. I came out of college with an art and communication degree, and then
That's a cool combo, art and comm.
Yeah. So I mean, basically, I had to show my parents. I had to like major in something other than art to show my parents I was gonna like do something, and they were like, "You're gonna be a journalist," and I'm like, "No, I'm not. I don't want to be around people." Like,
do you know how many of my students who were English majors were like, "How do I like convince my parents?" And I'm like, I'm the worst person you should be asking right now because I'm like trying to reroute my career.
Right. Well, it's funny because I my day job is freelance writing, actually.
Oh.
And so that's how I like consistently pay the bills. But after I came out of college, that's not what I was doing. I tried to do the art thing. I was in Connecticut where people pay good money for art. Mm-hmm. And so it was hard. Like the illustration thing didn't really work out, but I was doing a lot of portraiture and working in oil paints, and people paid lots of money for portraits up there and whatever. And then I moved down to North Carolina when I was 25, I want to say. And once I moved here, it was like I would go to these vendor shows and whatever, and I would try to sell my stuff. And first of all, my stuff was always naked women. And naked women like choking themselves and like kind of dark, you know.
I don't know if the South is ready.
Oh my God, right. I was in between just pictures of the beach and more pictures of the beach.
Mermaids.
And sea turtles.
Live, laugh, love.
Oh my God, yes. And my things are like, fuck you over here, you know. So nobody liked my darkness. And then I threw in, I would like watercolor pictures of like fruit and try to sell it for like $10, and nobody bought that. And so I was like, well, fuck, I'm just not going to do this anymore. So I worked in an office, and then I had kids, and then I still worked in an office. And so coming out of having kids, after I had my first son, I actually hadn't painted probably in like 5 years or 3 years or something, or made any art. But I started to, it was that time when like blogs were becoming popular, and everybody was blogging about getting crafty with your kids and like all this crafty stuff you can do with your kids. And it was literally like, I forced my 2-year-old for me to paint their hand and like slap their handprint on something, and like they cried the whole time. And well, I thought it was cute at first. I was like, oh, that'd be so cute to do with your kid. But then when I'd actually try it, like the kid would be fucking crying, and then there's red handprints all over your house. Or like once I tried to like do something with food coloring and whipped cream in the bathtub, and I dyed my children blue. So I was like, this is not being creative with your kid. This is like putting everybody into a bad mood. And no wonder grown-ups grow up feeling like I suck at being creative, because like your parents probably made you cry by like painting your butt cheeks and turning them into a pumpkin once. So it became my passion to teach parents how to interact creatively with their kids. That's where Make Your Perfect
That's really
started.
cool. I didn't realize that. And what's interesting is I just talked to a woman, or I interviewed with a woman for maybe one episode ago. Yeah, it was just this last episode. She runs a program called Mini Me Yoga, and her thing isn't about teaching kids yoga. It's teaching adults and parents how to teach their kids yoga.
And that's awesome.
So that's really interesting, because I mean, these things start from the top.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and they start from the top, from the bottom, you know, from the bottom, from the top. But like, so, right, because if the parent is teaching, it really starts with when you're a child. And as children, at some point, we were all taught to turn off our creativity. Like, we had it for a little while, and then it was like I remember my parents always asked me, like, what are you doing? You know, like that, when I would like be making a mess.
Yep.
And that got me to be like where I really didn't make art until I went to college, because I was finally out of the house. And if I wanted to make paper in the bathtub, I wouldn't have to explain what I was doing to anyone.
That's
you
how
know?
I felt about even my college experience, because, that's fine. I hit the mic all the time. Okay. So for people who are hearing that, look, we're just two people hanging out with a microphone, and sometimes we hit it. Yeah. But you know, when I decided to major in literature in college and in grad school, you know, I have both degrees are in English literature. You know, it's not necessarily like creating, but it's still a creative process, right?
Yes.
And my dad, instead of honoring that, he would say, well, what about dental hygiene? You missed the mark. Like you missed the mark.
Because you're not like being published all over the place and writing all these books. You're just doing this, and that's not enough.
And so like something creative. Now, they never stopped me, right? That's like one thing I'll always say about my parents. They never actually stopped me from doing anything.
But instead they said all these things.
Or it's just like never, it just wasn't like the path. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
It is. So, I mean, that is like, that's the crux of it all, is that like that's why most people grow up being like, I'm not creative, because maybe they can't, like, if they want to draw that flower and they want to make it look like that flower, they can't make it look like that flower. So they say, boom, I'm not creative. But creativity is what you do walking through this world. Yes, on a daily basis. It's the creative process that you use when you're planning where you're going to go to dinner that night or whatever. You know, there's different levels. And yeah, and your style, for example, like that's a creative process. God, we're so creative. So if you work, and I think anyone who works in anything, you know, in any job, like you have to be creative. I don't know, you have to be creative to live. So anyway, everybody is creative. You are all creative. I don't care if you can't draw a straight line. Who can draw? Nobody can draw a straight line.
I just wish everyone could see the way she's looking at the microphone.
I'm looking like, at all of you.
Staring at the microphone. Like
that was my soapbox.
Like hard.
Everybody is creative and everybody is an artist. And so that's what I wanted to show. Like with Make Your Perfect, I started blogging about stuff, and then I actually opened up a play space for kids in this town. Like an indoor play space. It was just like a big open room with like wooden toys, and kids could hang out and get creative. And we had an art room and blah, blah, blah. But I wanted to teach parents, like, yes, I get that kid is not actually painting with the paintbrush, but the fact that they are taking all the paintbrushes out one by one from the container and putting them in the other container, like that's creativity at their age, at their stage of development, right? So anyway, I opened this play space, blah, blah, blah. It ended up being that I realized nobody cared about the play space. Nobody cared what their children did. They weren't bringing their kids in to get creative. They were coming in to hang out and open up with other women. Like the moms were just there, going there to like connect, right?
Yeah.
And what I heard...
It was like a place for their kids to go do something so they didn't have to deal for a little bit and connect with each other.
Exactly. And I was always there connecting with them. And so what I heard from people a lot, and I have always been... No, not always. After I had kids, I actually was not this outspoken before I had kids. Before I had kids, I didn't really talk much. I was really shy.
I find that very hard to believe.
It's so fucking weird. And my name is Gaby. So when I was little, like new teachers would be like, oh, Gaby, like you must talk a lot. And I'd be like, I'm like, stop saying that. That embarrasses me. But after I had kids, I think I just like I didn't have time to fake anything anymore. So I just like became who I was, right? But that's what it was. Like when I was there at this play space, the moms would say to me stuff like, thank you so much for saying this. Like, thank you so much for sharing whatever you just shared, like, so fucking openly. And it usually was, like, something about, like, hating my children. They're out there, though. I love you guys,
though. They whisper that. They're out there somewhere.
Somewhere. We don't know where. We're locked in my bedroom, and my kids have the run of the house right now. But, yeah, and so they were like, thank you for saying that, because I always thought I was the only one who felt that way. But now that you said that you felt that way, too, I don't feel so crazy. And so kind of everything has stemmed from that. So after that, I closed Tea Muffin, deciding that I was like, I want to work with the moms. Like, fuck the children. I can't even say that on a podcast. I'm sorry. That was hard.
No, like, you're apologizing, and I just envisioned T-shirts.
Fuck the children. It's about us. We're taking it back.
Do you know how many moms would probably secretly have like a little sticker somewhere, like in a drawer, like fuck the children?
It's like underneath the baby on board sticker on there. They put that on first and then cover it up with the baby on board sticker.
That's hilarious.
I'm going to start making those just with it on the back.
Yeah.
So I was like, I want to work with moms. And Make Your Perfect was actually the tagline of Tea Muffin, which was the play space. So, and the whole idea was like, for your kids, for your motherhood, like make it your version of perfect.
Okay.
Okay. And then, so that's what that meant. I've always been terrible at naming stuff. Like it means a lot to me. And so people are like, what, how do you even say that? But yeah, so, and that's what it was about. And then I did some coaching for a while. I wanted to help continue that, like helping women now in the stage of motherhood, like being trapped in motherhood, all these women saying they were trapped in motherhood, and I wanted to show them, like, you are not trapped. This is all you need to do to get out of this, right? And so I did coaching for a while. And through that time, I wasn't really making art, but I think I was still being creative with my own kids. I was helping other people be creative with my own kids. Like the creativity never went away. I just wasn't painting a painting. Again, like that idea of, but I gave myself guilt. I was like, well, if I'm an artist, like, and I'm not making paintings, am I really an artist? Which is what grown-ups do. And so that's like a thread that goes along with everything that I've taught and everything is accessing your own creativity in whatever way that, whatever that means for you. When you do that, like that's when you start to access this, like this expression of yourself and the expression of yourself, not just like, being expressive through art, but being able to go hang out with a group of women and have a great conversation. Yeah. Because it was stuff like that was hitting me at that time too. I had kids. Whenever you'd go, like you do meetup groups, and it was fun. Having kids was a great way to meet a ton of moms and women, right? But you would go like on these moms night out, and it was like, I'm sorry, you guys, anybody who ever went on a mom's night out with you, but come on, they're boring sometimes. Everybody talks about their kids, and you were like rolling your eyes like, fuck, I just want to have a real conversation. But all these women, and I don't think I think in my experience, it happened through childhood or motherhood and having children, but I think it happens to all women. Like you're in the workforce, so you lose yourself. You have kids, so you lose yourself.
Oh, there's a dog barking. What's your dog's name?
Chance.
Chance, that's right. Chance was rooting through my bag, which reminds me of my dog Beanie, who passed away last year. But she used to dig through my bags and steal my snacks because I would like put snacks in my bags, for work and stuff, and then she would find them.
My dog was probably going for the crotch of your swimsuit. Is that a swimsuit?
Oh yeah, there is a swimsuit in there.
Yeah.
Oh, dogs.
Dogs. And I mean, he's a pussy dog, which is like, it's not surprising.
Dogs. I was just thinking too, I don't have children, and so I've never done like the mom's night out sort of thing, but even just being around groups of moms, and anyone I know who's a mom, don't hate me because I don't mean this, but I have heard the competitive birth story a million times. Well, I was in labor for 16 hours. Oh, that's nothing. My child. And I'm like, oh my God.
But it's like, that's your only frame of reference at that point. That's your only thing.
Which is not
that's making you like feel good about yourself is that you like powered through labor.
Which is super important, right? Yeah. Like it's really important to women and mothers and I think femininity at a lot of levels, but there's more beyond that.
Oh my God, right? But you've lost it all. So that's like all you can like dredge up to talk about is that or like your children, right?
Yeah.
And I think it happens when you go out with coworkers, like if you are in the working world and you're not a mom or whatever, you go out with coworkers, it's hard. Like everybody's got some version of their
every time I go out to go out with the yoga teachers, we all end up talking about yoga.
Interesting.
Which I mean, it's fun. I like yoga, but Dharma Drops podcast is really designed to remind everyone that there's more to life than yoga.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Right. I think, and that's like, that is what Make Your Perfect became ultimately. So thanks for bringing it back. Even
I'm just here to help guide conversation. That's all.
Oh my God, you're good. You're good.
Oh, thanks.
But yeah, so that's like, it all came back to that for me personally was, I was like super, and I was a workaholic. I am kind of a workaholic. I love helping other women.
Like, I can't stop working. Yeah. It's a real problem.
I mean, I opened a business, closed a business, started coaching, stopped coaching, and now I got back into my art. So that the story culminates, and I finally got back into my art. I finally realized like what I like to do is not teach women or coach women or I don't even, and you know what? I didn't want to hold their hands as they went through the journey, but I wanted them to know the journey was possible, and I wanted to inspire them going into the journey, because that's what women told me that I did. That by me, like, talking so openly about everything, I inspired them to, like, go through some journey or go into a new, like, deep dig for another part
That's
of
really
themselves.
Interesting, because for me, like, that's how the yoga practice is. I mean, it's different. It's two different subjects, but, like, I believe that a good yoga teacher doesn't take you down the path. They open the path.
I mean, right? It's so interesting. But as a yoga teacher, isn't it so hard to, like, take yourself away? Your ego becomes so involved and you take it so personally if someone is maybe not learning or not going down the path the way you envisioned them to be going down their path or whatever. And then you take that so personally. And that was really hard for me as a coach. I was like, I
feel like for me, it's actually not too hard, but I also have so much experience working with young people. which will teach
you do experience, like you are working with young people.
Well, yeah, because I worked, at UNCW for so long, and so I'm very accustomed to being like, well, yes, that's the path, but you've just... you just fell. You have stalled out down that path. So I don't find it super hard to not take it personally, but it's a conversation I hear a lot.
It's interesting.
In the yoga world.
But that's probably what makes you a really good yoga teacher.
I hope.
Is that
you have to ask other people.
Mm-hmm.
I try not to. I can't really think of any examples of when I have, but I do know that that's something that happens, and like being able to let people go.
Yeah,
if maybe they have hit a wall in the path with you, just, okay, now it's time for you to move to someone else. Or like, you're not listening to me, and now you're just doing it on your own,
Oh my God, you are so funny, because what's going through my head right now? I'm like, that is how I feel about my children. Like, because that's another thing, like, you take it personally if your kids aren't like growing up the way you want them to be raised, right? And I wish I could be like, oh, you're not listening to me. You can just go, I kind of say that sometimes, but yeah, like, I wish you could be like, you can go try it with someone else now.
Yeah, you can go find somewhere else to live for the next 20 years.
Right? It's not working out with me, obviously.
This relationship between you and me, it's not working. It's really you. It's not
right?
me.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what I want to tell them all the time. But that's the stuff that nobody talks about, though. That's the stuff that women don't talk about. They don't talk about, like, I actually do feel like that. I actually do want to go sell them to someone else for 5 years because I don't know what I'm doing and it doesn't feel good. And there's like, and so I think like in voicing that, I think it's just so huge for women to talk, period. Whether your mom's talking about that, whether you're talking about yoga, whether you're talking about like, whatever. I think it's so important to put it out there, because the more you talk about how, like, what you're really going through for real without sugarcoating everything, then other people are like, you know what? I feel that way too. And now we're really connected.
A friend of mine, I haven't seen her in years. She moved to Charlotte a long time ago. But I remember when she was pregnant and everyone was like, oh my God, it's going to be the best time of your life. And she posted on Facebook. She was like, I really appreciate all the positivity, but I'm going to be really honest. I'm scared shitless. I don't feel well. I'm not looking forward to this right now.
Wow, yeah.
And like, not like in this, like, I don't want to have this baby sort of way, but just like,
this is the reality.
And then all the comments were like, oh my God, I felt the same way. I'm so glad you said that. I remember feeling that way and I was too afraid to share it.
Yeah.
And like, I just remember watching from the outside, like, wow, that was like a really powerful thing for her to say out loud for herself and for other women, other moms.
That's the thing, yes. And so it just takes you to access that part of yourself like one time and express it in public one time, and look at how much that opens doors. Like my line from like a few years ago, the message coming to me from the universe for a while was like, I guess it was my mantra, was honesty opens portals. Because I was like realizing that being like expressing yourself without just hiding it all was really making like just magical things happen in the world.
I just can't stop thinking about a friend of mine right now who, it's a little bit different because it's not like motherhood stuff, but it's just the same thing. She's 30 and she was just diagnosed with breast cancer.
Oh my God.
Which is crazy. And she made the decision to be very public about it on social media and document it. Because she was like, look, everything is always about like women over 40 having breast cancer, and let's eat yogurt and put a little pink bow on it and call it something pretty, And she's been really open about it. And I think for her, it's something similar, because she told me we went for coffee recently and she was like, I understand this as a gift now. I mean, not that it is a gift, right? No one wants to have breast cancer.
But the lesson to be learned.
Right, but the lesson to be learned. And she was like, because now I have something to tell the world. Now I have this thing that can like really support other women, because she's not the only woman under, 30 years old diagnosed with breast cancer,
Wow. And that gives me goosebumps, because it sucks, right? That you have to go, or the people who do go through hardship to be able to come out with this message. But sometimes, and I don't know, the thought that came into my mind was like, are those people chosen because they're able to deliver that message? And I don't know if I believe that people are chosen, or whatever. But yeah, like you can, you can deliver that message, so do it. And here's the thing. We all, like every woman out there has a message to deliver. And I will say, like, in my life, I really haven't had hardships. So my message isn't coming out of like, oh my gosh, I had a horrible childhood or like a horrible even experience as a woman. I really haven't had a horrible experience as a woman. I have not been sexually assaulted the way, I mean, like, yeah, I've been sexually bothered, like I think all women are, but, you know, as part of, like, when the Me Too thing came out, I was like, I don't know if I should even say anything, because I don't even know if these things, like, constitute, like, a Me Too thing, or is it, and so, anyway, so there's, like, two threads of where this is going, but my point was that, you know, I think so many women are afraid to share their message because either it's too much because they've been through so much hardship or whatever, or it's not enough because they haven't really been through any really intense hardship. So they're like, well, is my message valid? Right. Yes. And it's whatever you have to say. I'm looking at the microphone again.
Seriously, she's like glaring at it in like in a passionate way.
Right? But yeah, whatever you have to say is worth saying. Yeah. Is the whole, you know, point of the matter. The fact that, you know, how, like, I haven't really been through any, like, huge struggle. My life, I've had a blessedly divine, amazing That's awesome. Life, you know? But as a woman in this world, and I think because my life has been so great, and I've had so many, I'm so grateful for, like, all the opportunities I've had and whatever, but almost because of that, I can see how I have also come through this society as, like, a woman in society, and like I've seen the way women are treated, and I've been groomed to grow up as a woman in society, and I could, like I said, I wasn't really vocal about anything or expressive or whatever until I had kids and didn't have time. Until then, I mean, I was I lived a great life, but I was not myself. I was like in the mold that my parents had taught me to be, that society had taught me to be, you know. Part of the reason why I wasn't really outspoken before that is because, you know, I had always been taught that as a lady, you have to have good manners. Yeah. You know, and saying fuck. Yeah. And, or sharing something like dark about yourself or a dark thought. Or
I remember my mom listens to this podcast sometimes. She's probably going to kill me. But she always used to, I can't say it, always used to say to me, God, you're so crass. I'm like, right? Yeah. I know.
You are crass and I'm crass, and that is why we're here talking.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so you do some pretty interesting artwork, though, with women. So can you share? I asked Gaby to explain to me what she wants to talk about, and she said that I forget how you wait, you can say it better than I did. I forget. You had like a really beautiful way of, I teach women how to, was it meditate on their pussies? Was that, what did you say?
Meditate on their pussies? I don't know. I was brain dead, remember? I had just got back from vacation. I was like, she wants me to tell her 2 sentences. I don't know. What did I say? But yeah, I mean, I don't know what I said, but my artwork is, what I want women to do. Well, what I see women are doing, and what I think is the opening that allows you to like be yourself and express yourself fully and be outspoken and be as crass as you want to be, you know what I mean, is to have this connection with your pussy. I guess like one of the things I often say is like, if you want to be like yourself, if you want to be, you know, break out of this mold and you feel like there are these things that are still choking you, still kind of keeping you down in some way, you're like, oh, maybe it's when I get together with other women, I never know exactly what to say, or, you know, that feeling that I just never know exactly how to quite be myself. Like, the answer is look at your pussy.
But okay, so can you explain why?
Okay, so this is
because this is like when you sent me your text message with what you're going to talk about, I was like, I don't even know how I'm going to guide conversation because like so I've never had this conversation before.
Yay! I love having this conversation for the first time with people.
I also can't stop laughing because so many people have told me like, I was listening to your podcast in the school pickup line. I was like, oh shit, turn the volume down. So I'm just wondering how many people right now are like, oh shoot.
Well, I will say, I use the word pussy and vagina around my kids, and they don't get in trouble at school for saying it. They know what it is. They don't
vagina
like to
is definitely
use it.
like,
Vagina's fine.
That's like the word.
Yeah, that's the word. But I even use the word pussy, and one of my sons started saying titties recently, and I had to explain to him like it's not kitties, it's like your boobs. But But they use that word, and I don't think it's not a bad word, but that's like a whole other aside. We can talk about that.
That's a podcast for another.
It's another podcast. So the whole thing about your pussy is basically this: if there is a part of your body that you are downright ignoring, then how are you going to feel complete? Like everyone, and all of us, like, especially, and this is why I think where we connect in terms of like the yogi side of you,
right,
is that your pussy is like, it's also your womb center. It's your second chakra.
Right.
So even if you don't, and even if you're a man, like you still have energy in that chakra. Like you have energy in that space. Right. And it's your life force energy. It's your creative energy. It's your intuition.
Because there are men listening to this podcast, more than I thought actually, who probably this time are going to be like, what the fuck is happening?
Look at I call it your energetic pussy, you guys. That's what it is. Look at your energetic pussy.
My boyfriend listens to this podcast and he's going to be like, I'm not looking at my energetic pussy.
Well, then I will draw it for you and you'll have, but see, there are a lot of women listening to this podcast and they're probably saying, I'm not going to look at my pussy either, you crazy girl. And
so do you mean like straight up, I'm going to take my eyeballs and look, or is this more of like the internal gaze?
All of it.
All of it.
All of it. So here's the thing. You can't have the internal gaze if you don't have the external gaze. I mean, you can work on, because what happened to me is basically I started getting into a spirituality practice and learning more about different spiritualities and kind of following the path that felt good for me. And at the same time that I was doing that, I was also like, I came across, I think I was in an entrepreneur group with a girl who was a sex coach, and she has now like taken off and I've followed her the whole time. Mm-hmm. And so I was learning from her. And so I started to do practices with like a jade egg, like a yoni egg that you put up inside of you. Yeah. And that's a little bit of internal work. Like it's a little external. You have to actually like put something in there, but it's a little internal, and it's like, you realize you can do all this work, or you can think you're very sexually open or whatever, but then someone asks you to like take a mirror, look at your pussy, and it's like, nope. Yeah. Thanks. And so there's a cutoff there. And there's like a meme recently that I saw and probably shared, but it's like, if you want to be a powerful woman, but you can't look at your pussy, there's a little problem there.
Right. And going back to what you were saying too, and I mean, most Dharma Drops listeners probably know a little bit about the chakras, but to like come back to the earlier conversation, this is the space of creativity. Yes. Right? Like the second chakra is the space of creativity. It's the water space.
Yes.
So even if we're just talking about living a creative lifestyle, this is the space of the body.
Girl, you just brought it together, and that's where that came from.
I'm just here to guide conversation. Yes.
But yeah, that's exactly right. And so if you feel, and a lot of women, coming out of motherhood, or I think coming into your like mid 30s, at some point you're like, all right, I did the career thing, I got the house, I've done the milestones, and now I want to get back to myself. I want to, a lot of times it has to do with finding your hobbies or wanting to get spiritual. Like a lot of women start a spiritual path at that age. And a lot of women want to get creative in some way. They want to take an art class again, or get
really
back to
interesting
an instrument.
Because the last few days, since I was like planning to come over here and record this podcast and stuff, I have not felt super creative lately. I've just been really busy, like building, a business and a brand and stuff like that. And I was thinking I used to do much more creative stuff. And in fact, this morning I was like, what did I used to do that was creative? And it wasn't anything. I'm not an artist. I can't draw shit.
You are an artist, but you may not be able to draw shit, but you are an artist.
I make really amazing little greeting cards, right? Ooh. And I used to do things like knitting, and I do dance, which has always been my creative outlet, but even dance sometimes can end up feeling much like work, during rehearsal season and stuff when we're preparing for performances, it can feel a little like, fuck, all right, I gotta go,
That makes sense, because what we are taught in this society is to follow a masculine path, to follow the masculine energy, that the masculine energy is the one that has value. So the masculine energy is direct lines, like linear action that takes, builds on itself.
Which I think is like important and not wrong.
Yes, nope, not wrong.
Because I think what's important to remind listeners is sometimes when we talk about things like following a masculine path, dudes are like, well, what's wrong with that? Nothing, right? There's nothing wrong with it.
Except, so what happens is that it's so highly valued that the feminine energy is just literally choked, blocked, suppressed, not allowed to come up. And you need a balance. So if you are just like you have to, if you want to embrace your whole self as a human, you need to look at your pussy, then you need to embrace your feminine and masculine energy.
Have you read the book Lean In by... Cannot think of her name right now.
Yeah, no, I know the book, but I haven't read it.
I read it for a professional development book circle a long time ago because that book came out a while ago. But even someone, I can't think of her name. This happens to me every time I record a podcast, and I promise you, everyone listening is like, oh, what her name is, you know,
like writing in the comments.
Yeah, I can't think of it right now. But she talks about this too, like not to use your femininity as like manipulation, but like if you are a woman in power, you're still a woman in power, right?
Yes. And so you may not have to do things the same way that the man in power does it.
And that's okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm. You can still it can still be powerful.
Right.
Yes.
So I had an old therapist, and she always told me, and she didn't mean this in the literal way, but she always used to say, you know, Becky, the power of the pussy is quiet. And she didn't mean like you don't have to speak, but she was really talking about this like lunar path, right?
Yes.
That it's like creative and it's dark and it's internal.
Yes, it's subtle and you can't see it.
Subtle is a good word.
Yes.
Subtle, yeah.
So that's the thing. We live in a world where like straight lines and action equal productivity, equal success, but only if it's visible and only if you're doing. Whereas the feminine energy is the energy of reflecting, the energy of feeling. And so what a lot of us do, you know, it's the energy of creating. It's also a circular energy. So I want to say this for any women listening or men listening whoever feel like, God, I just don't get anything done because I'm always coming back to the same thing or always learning the same lesson. That's your feminine energy. And we're taught that that's not okay, but that is okay. Mm-hmm. That's what how feminine energy works. Like the moon, like nature. It's cyclical.
Yes. I said secular, which is a hybrid between cyclical and circular. And secular. Making shit up over here. I'm thinking about a theorist that I read and I used in my graduate thesis, which was about the Wicked Witch of the West. Yeah. And I actually talked, I sometimes I'm always really freaked out by how my life comes back to the same lesson, right?
Right?
Yeah, because it was about Western dichotomies and how when they're merged together, it creates this sense of like wickedness, right? And so very long story short, I argued in my master's thesis that the Wicked Witch of the West, in the book Wicked, she combined masculine and feminine, human and animal, and mind body to create this hybrid. And we don't understand the hybrid, right? And that's why she's wicked. But in that's a long story for me to explain that.
I want to read it. I have goosebumps again.
It's weird as shit. So coming back to it, there's a theorist named Rigori that I used, and in that, in my thesis, and she talks a lot about how writing in the feminine is cyclical. And that we can't, like, there's this like linear, and she doesn't necessarily mean like literal, like we can't start from point A and go to point B, but it's like the whole thought process, right? Yes. That it doesn't have to be this like really structured thing, right? That it's cyclical and we can move around, it can curve, it can take shape and create something new and come back, you know, and that's her whole theory, which is pretty cool.
And that is cool. And that, like what you said, create something new. So in that circle, in that formation that you're doing to go all around from point A and eventually maybe get to point B or back to point A, it is this idea that you're creating something along the whole way. And even if you can't see, so that's where there's this link to spirituality as well, because even if you can't see what you're creating, it doesn't mean that you're not creating something. Like, you are always creating something by living in the world with your energy. And if you feel stagnant or bored with your life or whatever, it is probably because you are not accessing all of your full energies. And I think for both men and women, it's usually that you are living in a very masculine energy dominant way. And you need to allow more of a balance between accepting and celebrating the feminine energy, because we don't celebrate the feminine energy. We tell us when we're going in a circle, we're like, oh God, we're going through a circle again. And we're like, shame on you for doing this. Like, instead of just going for what you want. Or when you're experiencing emotion, when you're like really depressed or sad or any emotion really, we like chastise ourselves. Why can't you just like let this roll off your back and get over it? And so if you're doing that, you are not truly living. I do believe that we chose, like our souls or whatever you call it, chose to be in human bodies for a reason. And a human body has all these abilities, right? We have like physical sensations, internal sensations, and this combination of it all, like the mind-body connection, bringing it all together. And we are using that for a reason. So if we're choking it off for some reason, like if we're blocking off our feelings, then we're not truly living in this vessel that we chose to come live in.
Yeah. I think it's complicated to live. I can't speak for the male experience, but I think that Western, going back to whole WASP stuff to bring it full circle again, I think it's complicated too because we're in a very sexually driven culture, but it's also very shamed. Right?
Yes.
Like, there's sex everywhere. Like, I'm watching the TV show Ballers right now. It's an HBO show with The Rock, because I love The Rock.
That's so
you know,
funny.
and it's like a good show. And there's like a ton of sexuality in it, which is fine. Doesn't bother me. But then you go out into the world and it's like, can't do that.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Oh,
and
yeah.
so there's this confusion about how to live. And I do wonder sometimes, though, for women of a younger generation, if they still feel that.
It's interesting. I have a friend who I just met through this coaching group who is 30, and she keeps telling me, she's like, so what I do within my art is I actually paint portraits of women's vaginas to help them look at it, right? So like that's the first step sometimes. If you can't look at your vagina in a mirror, well, maybe you can send me the picture. And then when you put that picture up on your wall and it's more abstract, and people are always like, that's beautiful. Then
I've
you're
seen
like,
your work online. It's really beautiful.
thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, then you can say that my pussy is beautiful and I look at it every day, and now you're starting to be able to create that connection. But anyway, so I always thought that it was like women who were our age and had gone through this stuff, like their milestones in life or having a kid.
Yeah.
Right. And this girl she's like, no, girl, she's like, millennials. She's like, my friends, we're your target market because we're not afraid of that shit. Like, we're not afraid of our pussies. And so that's really interesting to see, because that's the thing. I think that women our age are often afraid of we were taught.
I can't believe I'm at an
like,
age where we say women our age.
I
Fuck,
know.
what's happening?
I don't know, we're old.
Oh, I forgot I have water. Gabby brought me a glass of water and forgot it was mine when she walked in and started drinking my water.
Oh, no, yeah.
No, you gave me another one.
So
She
then I
was
had to get
like,
you
you want
another
some
one.
water? I was like, sure. And she came in, she took a sip. She was like, I just drank your water.
Wait, this was yours. But I got her another one. I'm a good hostess.
You are a good hostess.
Thanks.
So anyways, back to millennials.
So so there's that. So I think women our age are often afraid of our pussies and of our generation, right? Our generation is a little more open than our mother's generation, but our mother's generation went through an interesting thing with like the feminist movement starting and all of that.
Yeah, it means the summer of love.
The summer of love. But so this is where it's very interesting. So, and I think it'd be so interesting to like be a fly on the wall in that time, like go back to the 1960s and see really how it was. Because now, you know, what I'm seeing now with modern women our age or older, you know, between their 40s and 50s, that's when they say, like, women come into their sexual peak and all of this. And so I do have friends who are like, damn, they weren't wrong. Like, I'm having all this sex and my relationship with my husband. Or they've gotten divorced and now they're, like, having great sex with, like, their new partners or partner. And so it's still tied to sex, and it's still tied, like, their sexuality is still tied to sex, and it's still tied to, like, this idea of, like, horniness. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes up in an environment where it's not, like, quote-unquote appropriate, it's still shut down.
Right.
And I think for millennials, it's a little bit different. And what I am trying to what I have realized in my own, like, spiritual journey is that they are one and the same. And so if you shut down your sexuality when you're not having sex, then you are missing out. It's kind of like saying, like, it's a part of your sensory system, right? Mm-hmm. It's like saying, well, I'm going to shut down my sense of smell when I'm not having sex.
Right.
And what would you miss going out in the world?
Right.
So it's like paying attention to your sexuality as another sensory experience that is not only, you know, just tied to like physical pleasure, like touching the skin of your genitals and that turns you on, but how that then relates to like your inner working. So talking about like going inside to like the chakras or the energy, and you start to notice like it's hard to explain until you've been through it. But what's really cool is that when I talk to women who have been through it, they're like, yes, why didn't someone tell me? And it's like, well, I can tell you all I want, but you're still going to be like, well, Gabby, I'm not going to go home and masturbate because I got way too much shit to do today.
And it makes me think too, the the more you shame something or hide something, or I guess, let me rephrase this. When you sexualize something appropriately, not in this like weird way that like Hollywood's done, stuff like that, it actually becomes less sexualized, and not not in like a bad way, but like, so when I was in Europe a few years ago, everyone's topless at the beach, right?
Yes.
And I was like, I don't know, I'm going topless in the beach. And I was like, you know what, fuck this. When in Rome, do as, just when in Rome, do it. And no one cared, right?
Yeah.
Like the dude came by to buy beer, didn't give a shit that I was topless. He just wanted to make some money with some beer, right? Yeah. And so when I think like when you own your sexuality, it becomes less of an issue, right? It's an issue at the beach when we're all covered up here at Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina, trying to make sure nothing shows, suddenly becomes an issue, right?
Yeah. Right. Well, and
does that make sense? I'm having a hard time articulating myself.
No, but that's the thing. When it comes to talking about sex, sometimes it is, because there's so much surrounding it that it's hard to like talk about it without going off on a million tangents or articulating yourself properly, because we've been taught not to articulate thoughts about sex. So of course it's hard to articulate, but I totally know what you mean. And yeah, when you allow sex to like permeate and open up and just be open about it, then it becomes part of your everyday experience.
Right. And it's just not a thing.
No,
right?
And it's not like, oh, I'm getting myself off all day, so I'm like, I'm horny all day. But it's like a literal being turned on by life. And not just turned on in a like, oh, I'm light-filled and feel happy, but it kind of is then genital experience. But it's not sexual. It's so weird. It's like your sexuality becomes an
awakening.
It is an awakening. Yeah. And it's like the ultimate connection to the energy of the universe, your own workings.
Well, the second chakra is a space of potential, right? We think about it in terms of like having babies, right? Yeah. Like, oh, it's potential. But if that space is alive and it's been reawakened, it's the potential of your life.
Yes.
It's the potential of your career. It's the potential of your creativity. It's the potential of anything.
It's like the seed.
Right.
Yes. And you're watering it.
Yeah.
And we're taught not to water it. That's the thing. We're taught not to look at it. We're taught not, just like the close your legs thing. Like both of us are sitting with our legs wide open, you guys. But yes, like people telling you to close your legs or, all of it. Like, yeah, don't talk about sex in public, but God forbid, like, you don't put out for your husband after you've been married to him for 10 years, then he might leave you. So you better, like, be really open in bed but don't talk about it. Just don't talk about it.
You just can't live in two places at one time.
Right.
You just can't be in two places at one time.
Is what we've been taught.
Yeah.
But I believe that we should talk about it more, and we can live in all of these places because this is the human experience, right? And it's hard though. So that's where I recognize that it's hard. There's a lot of trauma. Your cells of your vagina hold emotional trauma that is connected with your brain. So it's like they hold memories that can be negative. Like literally, not just, it's like literally they like, you know how they're starting to find studies that show that your gastrointestinal cells are
the second brain.
Yeah, the second brain.
I was just having this whole dialogue in my head while you were talking. I was like, I feel like I need to mention the second brain.
Yes, no. Yeah. So they're finding out that the cells in your womb space are similar to. They also, I read something recently that said there's something in your heart that is also like that. Like the cells themselves can think.
Look, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional, but you just can't tell me that the cells of our body don't carry our experiences, right?
Like, you just can't. Point?
Yeah, you just can't tell me. I don't know how it works. I have no proof that it does, so I'm just here to say.
I agree.
It does.
Me too.
I'm not going to publish any studies about it. It's just fucking true.
Me too. Well, and I've read the studies about it. That's the thing with freelance writing and all that. Like, I do a lot of writing where I have to read studies. So I've read a lot of these studies, and I often don't remember them or whatever, but every time I read them, I'm like, oh, right. That makes so much sense. And so that's really interesting. So there's a lot of work to be done, and it can be really, and it's scary. And so a lot of times we shut ourselves off from our pussies and from our sexuality in general, unless we're like just doing it for sex and just doing it for someone else. But to do it for ourselves, to look at it for ourselves is hard. Sometimes to look at it with someone else is hard. Like sex is hard because we've been taught, we've just kept it so repressed for so long. And so
it's that Puritan life, man.
Yes. It's society has done it to us. And so my aim is to kind of peel back the layers and just start opening ourselves up so that we can all truthfully, because I get fucking bored. I get bored hanging out with people who are so repressed that they can't express themselves. And I'm like, oh God, I shouldn't have hung out with you today, you know? If only you looked at your pussy, then you might be cooler. Come back to me when you do.
I think, you know, when you said you get bored, one of the things I love, this is a little bit off topic, but one of the things I love so much about performing is it's an opportunity to speak. Right? It's an opportunity to be creative and then tell someone. And now, granted, it's modern dance, and half the people are like, the fuck was that?
But something went through them, even if they can't verbalize it.
Every time Aaron comes to one of my performances, he was like, what was that one about?
My husband, too, whenever he watches, like, So You Think You Can Dance, he's like, I just don't get it. I just don't get it.
The first time Aaron came to one of my dance performances was for Dance Dolores, which is a really cool thing here. It's a combination of film and dance.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super cool. And I was in this really wacky piece, and, like, we all had these different huge latex animal heads on.
Wow.
And, like, we did all this, like, crazy dance with them. And then at the end, I had to strip my friend Kate down into her nude undergarments and feed her newspaper while yelling headlines in a megaphone. And
Oh my God,
like,
that's amazing.
I was like, this guy had just met Aaron. I was like, he's never going to talk to me
Really?
again. I was like, I wonder if he's even still in the audience right now. And
my
we're still
God.
together, and he still comes to my stuff, and he's still like, what was that one about?
But that's nice that he asks and wants to know.
Yeah, I know. Well, and look, you can't, most people, like family members of dancers are like, the fuck was that? You know? But in any case, it's still an opportunity to say these things,
Yes.
right? And to express them through the body. You know, that's why I love performing so much.
Yes, and I think that you can get that through a performance in creative dance. I think you can get that through yoga. Just the activity of doing yoga connects things, and it's like the
That's
reason,
what mantra does in yoga, right?
Yes.
If you use mantra and you're working it into the body, it's like becoming this whole embodied experience.
Yes, and it doesn't matter what your brain says. So this is where I think a lot of people get hung up. They get hung up on like, well, I can't explain what that meant. Or I saw that dance performance and I can't explain with words like what it meant.
Doesn't matter.
But it doesn't matter because
Thank
you experienced it.
Right.
And it's the experience. Words are limiting. The experience is wide open. Like the experience is... There's full potential there. I'm like screaming.
I know.
Echoes.
I'm like all excited, but I'm just thinking about like my old roommate, Allison. She used to come to my performances too. And a lot of them, she'd be like, I didn't like that one. That one got on my nerves. I was like, good.
Yeah.
It worked.
Yeah.
And she was like, it was supposed to get on my nerves. I was like, no. But like the whole point is to feel
Elicit,
something,
yeah.
right? That's it. It's just to evoke some sort of response.
Totally.
And if you're like, that was fucking stupid and I'm annoyed about it, it's doing its job.
Yes, exactly. And that's
And now the rest of the work is hers to do, right?
Right.
But like it did its job.
Exactly. And maybe not. Like maybe the job, I believe that like our purpose in life is simply to have the fullest experience of this life that we can have.
Yes,
Right?
I'm always, and anytime I publish stuff about Dharma Drops, I'm always talking about experiencing and enjoying the fullness of life.
Yes.
The whole part of it.
Yes. And not trying to analyze necessarily why that is, but just to like really experience it. And so I love hanging out with women like you who get that. You know what I mean? And talking about it, we're opening things up. There's pockets of women opening this up. I see it happening all over the world and all, you know, in all these groups that I'm in on Facebook and just like different friends groups around. There's like, yeah, people are starting to talk and we're opening things up and we're connecting on a new framework that did not exist when I was 20, I feel like.
No, not at all.
And so I feel like with my art too, that's my goal, man, is like that's the thing. When I am making my art, and that's something I didn't realize until I started to go through a spiritual journey. I was like a total atheist until I was like 30. But I thought like metaphysical stuff was interesting. I thought like quantum physics was interesting. I thought like woo-woo stuff was cool. But I didn't know very much about it, right?
Atheism's always interesting to me to like, maybe in a philosophical route, it's sort of like to say that something isn't as equal to saying as it is.
Interesting.
Do you know what I
right?
mean? Like if I am like so steadfast, like, nope, this is not real. That's the same level of belief as saying something is real.
Exactly. Because you have
to
to like eschew like all of the things that, And so it's interesting because I was like that. I was like, I don't believe in anything. I don't even believe in science. Like even science is just like manifested and created from our own perspective. So how can that be real? So therefore nothing is real. But that started to change as I started to experience like this connection with more different energies. And and I don't even remember why I brought this up or where I was going with it.
Spiritual practice.
And like the full experience. Shit.
I do this all the time. Every time I record this podcast, I'm like, I don't know what I'm talking about.
I know. Oh, it came back. We did it.
And luckily we can edit. So for all, the last like minute and a half that we were like, what were we talking about? You missed all that part. Okay, so go ahead.
So yeah, when I make art, the best art that I make, I mean, there's a lot of times I'm just doing technical stuff, but when I am in the zone, and I'm sure you're with like this with dance, even with yoga, you are not worrying about the technical. When I am really in the zone, I am literally, sometimes I'm tracing something that I see on the paper. And I'm like, I'm not doing this. I see it happen. Like it happened when I did that painting on the left over there. It was appearing before me and I was like, oh my God, all I have to do is trace it. This is amazing. This is so easy. But I realized that so opening, it's like you can open up all these little like knobs on your body. And when you've opened up like the spirituality one, the physical sensation one, and there's all different physical sensations, right? Like taste, sight, touch, smell, all of those, but opening those up. Opening up the connections, the flow through meditation or through yoga. And then opening up your sexual part, your sexual body, all of that allows I think we're just transmitters, like antennas, and that keeps opening you up to then express it in whatever way that is for you.
So in yoga, we call them grantis. Right? Which I love that. They sound like little monsters, in your body. Granti. I'm pretty sure it's the word. I feel like if I'm wrong, I'll post it in the show notes. I'm pretty sure it's grantis. And they're like these knots, right? That's what they're called. And as you unlock them through the asana practice, it lets the energy flow, right? And it brings you back to your fullest self, whatever that is.
Whatever that
right?
is, yeah.
But the yogi says or believes that that's why we do all this work, to get rid of the knots.
All right, so think about this now. So if you're doing all of that, but you are have a chastity belt around your pussy, right? Are all the granties really able to let that energy flow? Put some granties in your pussy and then tell me how you feel about your yoga practice in a month. Or take away the granties in your pussy, right?
Yeah, you want to put them in there. You want to take them away. Yeah.
Yes. But so, that's a whole idea. And that's what I see happening to women. So many women are they're up leveling, right? I think collectively as a society, we're up leveling. I think we're doing that by accessing feminine energy more often. We're in a world where we're recognizing that we need a balance of whatever. We need balance of all of it, right? Let's not keep anything down. And so as that happens, I lost my train of thought again.
It's circular. It's gonna come back.
I know. And see, that's the whole thing. And I used to get so embarrassed when I was on a podcast or whatever, and I would have this circular tangents, ways of thought, or even when I was teaching or coaching people. And I'm like, no, this is actually our way. This is how we are supposed to process. So I'm not even apologizing for having circular thoughts anymore. But yeah, so.
Remember, listeners, you can always fast forward 15 seconds.
Yeah, a little tap there. We're all trying to up level. We're all doing all these things. Some of us are going back to school or finding new loves or taking up yoga practices. I know a lot of women our age who are just starting to do this, or spirituality practices or whatever, right? But if you're, and a lot of, I'm friends with a lot of you. So I hear you talk, and I know we hear this, the complaint of we're going over the same lessons again, or yes, I'm seeking and I feel like I'm getting somewhere, but there's still something that's blocked. A lot of times it's but my relationship is still shitty. I don't know how to be honest in my relationship, or I don't feel connected to other women. As much as I want to connect, I'm ready to connect. I'm ready to receive. Why am I not receiving? Why am I not exactly where I want to be? Right. And so my answer is what if you just tried to pay attention to your pussy a little bit? Just a little. Just do it and tell me. And a lot of times it seems frivolous. It seems like that idea of like, it's so crazy. Why would I even bother to do that when I can go to my yoga class and then go to my, evening college course I'm taking and then come home and be really good with my kids and blah, blah, blah. If I'm doing that all day, why do I need to look at my pussy? And it's like, because then you're walking through the world with like a black hole in part of your body that you're literally like redirecting energy around it and being like, la, 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 I'm not even paying attention to you.
Yep.
And just... And I was going to say, think of what can happen if that's no longer a black hole. But it's like we can't even think of what can happen until you try it and see and look back. And that's what happened to me. Like opening that up and now looking back is like, oh my gosh, it all comes together. My life feels so much more fulfilled. And not only that, but now I feel like I have access to like sensory experiences that I never knew were possible, like being able to see something on a paper and then draw it,
right?
Or being able to feel, like literally feel or hear energy that you never were able to feel and hear before, and sometimes I feel crazy. I'm like, maybe I'm just going crazy now that I turned 40, but I don't think that's it. I see it happening to women all over. I think women are accessing their full selves more, and that makes you more just like receptive to everything in your world.
I wonder too, like I know this is about women, but I never like to exclude anyone from conversation. And like you said, like we all have this space in the body, right? So I'm just curious to know, because I'm not a guy, I have no idea if they feel like they're missing the creative part of life as much as women. Or more. I think my gut would say more.
Yes.
But then I don't know. I think about like Aaron, for example, he's so creative just in different ways. Like he's rebuilding our kitchen cabinets, right? And that's like a whole creative process for him. That's like something I don't understand or do, but it is for him. And he really enjoys it.
Yep.
And I asked him, he was painting the kitchen yesterday. I said, do you like painting? He was like, oh, it's okay. It's rewarding. Like he feels good when it's done. I was like, we're two different people because the last fucking thing I want to do is paint anything.
Well, I think that we lately, especially in the news, I mean, everywhere publicly, we've been talking about how women have had it so hard, right? Mm-hmm. Women have been just oppressed in so many ways and just kind of like patted on the head and stifled and whatever. But honestly, I think that men have just as much because men have all of this. They have emotion. They have feminine energy too. And that's stifled in them just as much as it's stifled in women. Like,
if not more.
And it's even more fucked up for them to express it perhaps because it's been so taboo for like men to express feminine energy
for a long time.
So, I mean, if it's hard for women to express their feminine energy, it's like, what about the men who have that as well? And so, yeah, I can't even really speak to the male experience because I'm so far removed from like what it's like to be a man.
Right.
Except I have a husband. And I'm surrounded by men in my house. I grew up with women, but like my animals are male, my kids are male, my husband is male. But I do also think that we experience men and women just experience the world differently.
I totally agree with that.
Emotion-wise, I think even like what we call emotions might be something totally different for men, and I don't know.
I mean, on a really simple level, like physically, we experience like the temperature of the world differently. Like I read this study that women often feel colder. It's not because in fact, sometimes our bodies run a little hotter, but our skin registers temperature differently than men. So there's always this like big debate about like the office temperature and stuff like that. And it's because like we really do experience the world differently. We feel it differently.
Interesting. And I believe it because I feel like that, and I didn't even realize it extended to like your outward self. And it's interesting because before I had kids, I was like, men and women aren't different. It's society that makes them different. And they're not inherently different. And if you think so, like you're sexist. And when I have children, I'm going to raise them like gender neutrally so that they can just like, I don't want them to grow up with these norms. And then my boys, like, I just don't know how it happens. All they wanted to do was play with trucks. And I'm like, play with the My Little Pony. Look it's colorful. It's a horse. It's a horse. Play with the My Little Pony because I'm bored playing with trucks. It's a horse. Right? And they didn't want to.
Aaron talks about this all the time. He was like, little boys just want to hit shit.
It's so weird. Yes.
His brother, when his brother and his partner were expecting, they knew they're having a girl, but they were like, we're going to raise a gender neutral child. That little girl.
Girliest girl.
Oh, beyond.
Oh my God, that's so
and
funny.
they did all these things to be gender neutral. They're like, it just happened.
It's so weird.
They just come out how they're going to come out.
And I'm like, I wonder if, God, like if the societal influence is just so ingrained that it just starts
that's
happening
the big
so
question
quickly,
I have.
right?
Nature versus nurture.
Right.
You know?
It's a little, I mean, it's got to be a little of both. I mean, like when you point out stuff like that, like we ourselves receive things differently, whether we're male or female or in between, like, and that's the other thing though. That's the other thing. So as humans, are we all just experiencing things differently, right?
Okay, this stuff, like, you know those things, what was it, like the blue dress and
oh my God, there's a reason for that though. What was I just watching? Oh, I was watching like an art video and she was explaining why that happened.
It's weird, but it's so weird to realize that, like, people see the world differently.
Yeah.
Like, there's half the population saw that totally differently.
Yeah.
You know? And so what else are we seeing differently?
Exactly.
Not even just physically, emotionally, spiritually.
Yes.
I mean, we're all seeing the world differently. That doesn't make one version right or wrong.
No. And that's
it just makes it different.
That's where it's even more important to use like your fullest sense of expression, like to tap into your creativity.
Ooh, you're good at coming around full circle too.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's amazing. That's because our feminine energy is like ripe right now. So we're just like going in all kind of, what did you call them before? Sticulars? We're going
I don't know. I made up my own word.
Yeah. So, but yes, and then I lost my train of thought because you were like all applauding me, and then I'm like,
coming back to our creativity.
Oh yeah. But so coming back to our creativity is so important because of that idea that words are limiting so much of our experience. If we're trying to like really express ourselves, like words can only go so far. If you're seeing, you know, looking out the window, what you see, like you're saying that tree is green and I'm saying that tree is green, but what if we're both seeing it differently? Then green doesn't cover it, right? Mm-hmm. So we just need to access more ways to cover that, right? For ourselves, not even to be able to communicate or anything, but I think just to fully experience it. If we're experiencing stuff just in our mind, then we're only really experiencing it with words. And then our emotions are limited. Like everything we're experiencing is limited. So cracking that open and being able to access it by getting into flow states, which is really what like creativity is, without needing to explain it. Like to me, that's like the key to the perfect life.
I keep thinking about an old coworker of mine who told me when he was in college, he didn't know he had bad vision. He just like saw the world. It was blurry,
That's the way
right?
he saw it.
Yeah, just the way he saw the world. And then he went to the doctor and he was like, you need eye doctor. And they're like, you need glasses. And he said he put his glasses on. He couldn't believe all the little lines and the leaves of the trees.
Wow.
You know, and I think it kind of is a similar concept. Like if you take away one sense, you're missing the experience, right?
Yeah.
He didn't see the fullness of the tree, right? If you're not paying attention to your sexuality, if you're not paying attention to your pussy or your creativity, you're not experiencing the fullness of this life.
And you don't know it until you get it,
right?
And then take it away almost, right?
Right. You just
think that's what life is.
Right. It goes back to those stupid visual things. Again, there's another thing that popped up on Facebook for a while that everyone was talking about. I don't remember what it was, but if you looked at it one way, you saw one thing. And then if you could see it another way, you saw a cowboy. And it was one of those things, it took me forever to see the cowboy. But once I did, I could not unsee it.
Right?
The brain,
could you flip back and forth?
I could flip back and forth. Aaron and I were actually just talking about this. And so then you could flip back and forth. But until you saw it, until you knew, you just had no idea.
Yep.
You don't know until you know.
You're just like, no, that's a picture of a witch or like whatever else it is. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, that's the thing. That's the crux of it all. And so that's why working in this business is really hard, because it's really hard to explain to people that they need a portrait of their pussy painted, you know? And so...
Is this like something you say like at the school pickup line? Like, hey, have you like thought about getting your pussy painted?
Truthfully, I feel like I would be the kind of person
I feel like you would.
In fact, so...
May I paint your pussy now?
Right? Like, I know what you need. You look disheveled and stressed out.
Let me paint that pussy.
Right? You don't need a shower. In fact, my kid got in trouble for saying hooker at school recently, and I actually emailed the principal and I told him, I was like, listen, I think I said something like, I work with vaginas. And if my son, my son is mortified by the word, and if he knew that he was saying to somebody, like a girl, something that had to do with a vagina, he would not have said it. So I bring up my...
The principal's probably like, the fuck?
I know, right? Yeah. I bring up vaginas a lot. But I think we should. I think it normalizes it. Like, it normalizes our thinking about our own vaginas if we talk about it.
And just also the language, right? I can't tell you how many times I've heard women say things like, well, I don't mean like the V word.
I know. I know.
It's not a hoo-ha, right? It's not, I don't even know all the other weird words.
Well, did you ever read the 50 Shades of Grey book?
No.
Books?
I opened to one page one time,
so
and I was like horrified. And I was like, I can't read this.
So in those books, which were supposed to be like the most sexual mainstream books to come out for like this age group, I haven't read them
or watched the movies.
But that's what they were touted as, right? So the woman who wrote them, no offense, author,
whose name we don't know.
I know, right? She just called it down there. So she would be like, just trying to be, like, it was supposed to be so raunchy and whatever, and she couldn't say anything more than down there.
Right, see, we're still skipping the whole crux of it. It's supposed to be super sexual, but ignore your vagina.
Ignore your vagina, yes. But put his throbbing cock everywhere, you know?
I think that should be our next sticker, too.
Put your throbbing cock everywhere. So yeah, I think we need to normalize it the way so we can feel it. Like, we talk about feeling things with our fingers, and that's what I say to my children. My children do get mortified because there are vaginas everywhere. Like, right now I'm painting a pair of... Actually, maybe not.
I don't see too many.
So much.
I see one painting, 2, 3. I don't see that many.
No, so that's good, I guess. I have a pair of shorts out there that I was painting vaginas on today, and my son said, he was like, those don't look like vaginas. And I was like, why? And he said they didn't look like vaginas. And I was like, why? And he was like, I don't know. I was like, is it because they're not hairy? And he's like, yeah. And they're all different colors. And I'm like, they are all different colors. I was like, yes, I did take out the hair for these pictures. But I was like, I'm like, that is a great way to like then explain to your kids. Like, so now my kids know vaginas are all different colors.
Yeah.
Like, so when they start watching porn, they're going to be like, that's wrong because my mom
I'm pretty sure they're purple.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually, my kid was, today he said they're not purple. He's like, I'm pretty sure they're not purple because I'm painting a purple one. And I was like, actually, sometimes they kind of are purplish. So I am letting them know what's up, you know? And I think we all need to do that. I think talking about it more lets people know that this is part of your body. This is part that's okay to feel.
Yeah.
And what happens when you start feeling it.
So if listeners want to get their vaginas painted, how did they get a hold of you?
So my website is makeyourperfect.com.
Awesome.
And I'm pretty active on Instagram under the same...
At Make Your Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you can get a hold of Gaby that way. Is there anything that you want to share as before we wrap up into like the next little segment of what I always like to do on the podcast?
Ooh.
Any big takeaway?
Just if you think that it's like too... not important enough or sounds so crazy. I know you think like paying attention to your pussy might sound so crazy. I invite you to just consider looking at it. Just see what happens. Just see what happens. You may be appalled, but like you're feeling something new.
Do you know what's crazier than looking at your vagina? Pushing a baby out of one. So if you can have a baby,
but maybe not. I think it's crazier to look at your vagina, honestly.
I don't know, man. That baby
to look at a woman pushing a baby out of your vagina. That's harder than looking at your own, I think.
I don't know much about birth and babies.
But look at it. Just look at it. Because I think if you can't look at that, what else are you not looking at about yourself? So what else are you not being honest about? And I know, and like, again, going back to like, if you think it's crazy, if you think like, no, I have all this other stuff to do, just consider it. And that's what I like to share on my Instagram. So if you follow me on Instagram, I like to share because I like no longer am in the coaching world. So now I share what I'm learning from other coaches or like, just what inspires me from other coaches. And once you start getting into that, it's kind of addicting, you're like, ooh, this sounds so interesting. Let me learn more. And then again, like once you see it, you can't unsee it. Just see it once, like take my word for it. and see what happens.
That's cool. What about for like the 5 guys that listen to Dharma Drops podcast? I can think of a few right now who are probably like, oh my God, Becky.
I know. I don't know. I feel like I have trouble talking to my husband doesn't really get what I do. And sometimes he's like, are you sure you're not gay? And I think sometimes he's like worried about that. But I feel like I'm so far removed from the men's experience. But so my thought is like, honestly, I would give you guys really big props if you started to pay attention to your womb space, like to your sacral chakra, and see if something shifts for you. And if it does, tell me. Like I do see myself down the road getting more into the male experience of it. But right now I just like have to take things one by one.
Sure.
You know?
Oh yeah, for sure.
But I did recently, so one of the things, I do actual vagina portraits where people snap photos and send them to me, but I also do energetic vagina portraits where I sit and it's kind of like doing an aura reading.
Oh, interesting.
And so I just get energy from you. And then in that idea of like when I am in a trance-like state and painting, I kind of see it appear and then I just follow it. That's kind of what happens when I'm sitting with you and I paint your energetic vagina, right? And so, and it's funny, so I'm friends with this guy who's a shaman, and you know, so you think he's like really open and whatever, and he totally is, but even he's making jokes about it. They go, you're like, I don't know if guys want their energetic vaginas painted, Gabby, you know? And then one day I did his. I was sitting with him at a vendor show, and like without him knowing, I was just like kind of reading him, and I did a portrait and I gave it to him and he was like, oh my God. And so I don't know like what it brought up for him, you know, but I was like, this is like your womb space center. This is your energetic vagina. And it's funny because someone said it looked like a peacock and I'm like, of course the one I paint for a man has a peacock in it. But so I don't know. Did that shift something for him? He definitely gives me less, what's the word? Like gives me less hassle about like or like makes fun of it less or whatever from the man's realm, like the man's point of view.
And I think it's important for guys to remember too that tapping into like what we call the womb space, again, it's potential. So if you see potential, I can't speak man language, I'm sorry, 'cause I'm not a man, but let's just think about like that traditional route. If you see potential in career, that's the womb.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
If you see opportunity, it's the womb, right? And so, like, being a witness to the potential of your own life is tapping into that feminine.
Yes,
Yes. And feminine, we should have said this in the very beginning. At least in Eastern philosophy, feminine doesn't mean woman.
It doesn't mean woman. It's just the different energies. So it's like yin, it's the yin and yang energy.
Right. Call it whatever you want.
Right.
You know, call it X chromosome, call it Y, I don't care, right?
And honestly, if you didn't like back in the day, when I was 20, I wouldn't have believed in that either. I would have been like, they're just lumping things into 2 categories, but everything's just really so different. How can you lump it together? So even if you don't believe that there are 2 separate categories, the goal is like just feel everything, or just allow yourself to feel everything. It's not like, oh my God, I gotta feel everything at every moment, but notice what you're blocking in your life, and you know, if you put it in the dichotomy of the feminine and masculine energy, it often is, we often block the feminine energy because we've been taught it's not valuable to express or use or whatever. But, you can hear my kids
There's
in the
kids
background.
in the background. That's the first. I've had cats in the background, dogs in the background. Now we have kids in the background.
Wow, that's the first. They must have come home. We found my children just at the end of the podcast. Perfect timing. But yeah, so it's just that, like, consider, instead of judging I know, I'm like, what are they talking about?
They're probably like, what are they talking about?
I know, I'm sure. They're like, oh no, they already know we're talking about vaginas. But yeah, so consider that instead of shaming any sensations or emotions that you feel, allow yourself to process them and allow yourself to process them. That's where like yoga comes in. Like, allow yourself to process them. We often think processing comes in from journaling or thinking about it or venting about it, talking about it with a friend, but that's just what happens in your head. Let yourself process it like through the whole realm of your body. And that's where, so my tagline is, it's changed so much throughout the years, but the 3 words that I always use in my tagline are creativity, pleasure, and flow.
Cool.
And so it's anything that elicits creativity, use it. Anything that elicits pleasure, use it. Like, a lot of, when you think about your experience of the world, especially if you think about your physical touch sensation, start noticing how often you are blocking pleasure. And a lot of times it's because of an association with the tabooness of sex and pleasure. But pleasure doesn't just have to be sexual pleasure either. It's just like ultimate, to me, pleasure is like ultimate, like allowing of experience. And then flow, like anything that gets you into a flow state helps you access, it automatically helps you access your creativity, your intuition, like your womb center. And so everything that you do, whether you're a man or a woman, if you can do it with creativity, pleasure, and flow, then you are, you're doing, you know, awesome. Yeah, you're tapping into all of your energies.
And I think that is like a good takeaway at the end of this.
Yeah.
And it's, today is July 1st, but this will go live July 5th. So first of all, happy 4th of July to everyone.
Yay.
And in the spirit of independence, what freedom is that? You know, to have like, to enjoy your life, to be creative and be in the flow state. I mean, that's like, I know 4th of July is like a totally different thing. But if we're talking about wordplay, you know, with independence, that's like a real freedom in life.
Totally. Because really, we often think that the things that are holding us back are like money or some external factor, lack of opportunity, a poor relationship, whatever. But really, and I know we hear this in so many ways, but like we are really holding ourselves back. And I believe that we are holding ourselves back by not opening our, what did you call them? The gremlins?
Grunties.
Grunties.
Yeah, grunties.
Right? We're holding ourselves back just by like choking off our bodies, right? In some way. All the time. And this is the way that I think a lot of us, we explore a lot of different ways to open ourselves up. And this is a kind of an untapped way that a lot of people haven't explored.
Yeah.
So I want them to know like the freedom of exploring this like is totally transformational.
So cool. So I always like to end things on the podcast with some conversation about nothing has to do with anything. So is there anything happening right now that we should check out? Like any good books, any good TV shows, any good movies? I know you just came back from vacation. Anywhere we should travel to?
Oh my God, what should we talk about? I just went to, so I go to vacation somewhere in the North Carolina mountains every year. And
oh, nice.
Oh my God. And so, you know, my favorite thing to do there is to go to swimming holes.
I've never been actually to a swimming hole.
Magical. So this time, all right, so I'm going to leave you guys, I'll tell you this. So there is one in Pisgah Forest. It's outside of Jonas Ridge, North Carolina. And I can't believe I'm telling you this secret because it's like amazing. So it's part of the Upper Creek Falls, but it's the lower Cascades there. We went there. And I had read some blogs beforehand, and so I just had an idea. I was like, we have inner tubes, like big, nice ones. So I was like, let's bring those. But I was like, I didn't know how bad the hike would be. So we like deflated them, packed them in a backpack, put the pump in there, take the hike all the way down. We are the only people there. And there's this waterfall that like goes in this curve, like this S-curve down this beautiful flat rock into this just clear pool at the bottom. And you could go down it like you're at a water park, but it's natural and there's no one around.
Yeah, I love the North Carolina mountains. They're so beautiful.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So beautiful. We just went, it's actually been a month ago. We were in South Florida and then the Bahamas, but we went to Harry Potter World.
Oh yeah.
I'm not
That's magical too.
I'm not a Harry Potter person. I don't dislike Harry Potter. I'm just not like a crazy Harry Potter
I know nothing
fan.
about it.
You know, I've read some of the books. I've only watched one movie, but I'll tell you what, it doesn't matter if you're into Harry Potter or not. It's pretty amazing. Harry Potter World, it's like
it looks so cool.
And butterbeer is delicious.
I heard you can like find the recipe online and then
don't
just,
tell
like,
me
make
that.
it.
Don't
really?
I can't have it. I cannot.
Is it really bad for you? I don't even know what's
it's probably
in it.
like 20 cups of sugar or something. It's delicious.
Interesting.
It's really good. So that was really fun, but not beautiful like the North Carolina mountains.
Well, you know what's interesting is like when you go to a place like that waterfall place, you know what the first thing I want to say is like, oh, it's like Disney World. And you're like, no, actually Disney World tries to make things as magical as nature.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
We looked at going to Disney just because we were going to be in Florida, but I YouTubed it and I feel like if you don't have little kids, it wouldn't be cool. I mean, I guess I don't know. I haven't been since I was young. It just looked really little. So that's why we chose Universal.
I think Universal seems cooler.
I rode my first roller coaster at Universal last month.
Shut up. Why didn't you ride a roller coaster your whole life? Were you scared?
Because I'm scared.
What made you get over your fear?
Well, Aaron's not going to let me leave. I was not going to be able to exit that park without getting on that fucking roller coaster. It was like, do it. Actually, he wouldn't make me do anything I don't want to do. But I definitely get a little resistant. But I know myself well enough that if I didn't do it, I was going to really regret it when I left.
So that's awesome.
My first roller coaster was the Hulk, which apparently people call a rite of passage, which I don't even remember because I had my eyes closed the whole time.
Was it scary?
Yes. I remember going up the tracks and like laughing, and I was like, uh-oh. And then I remember one sliver of blue sky that I saw when I like just barely cracked my eyes open, and I was like, fuck this.
Oh my God.
And I was done. I was like, I don't want to do this.
I think it's scarier to do it with your eyes closed. Like,
Aaron was having the time of his life. I was not having the time of my life.
No.
I don't know if I'd do it again. I mean, I did. I don't know. It's just like I didn't feel amazing afterwards.
So I think the older I get, because I used to be terrified of roller coasters until my uncle gave me 25 cents to go on one at Disney World when I was like 11.
Yeah, give me more than 25 cents.
I know. And I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And I did it. And then I loved them. But as I got older, they hurt your body. I feel like when you're little, you're like, I don't care if I'm getting knocked around. And as I got older, I'm like, oh my God, it's just like a little, like, I don't know. It's uncomfortable.
I wish you guys could have seen her like jerking herself around. But we also did the ride at the Gryffindor building, which made Aaron very sick. Poor Aaron was like motion sick. He got motion sick at Harry Potter. He got motion sick on the ferry ride to the Bahamas. It was crazy.
Did you know he has motion sickness?
Yeah, but I think it was just like a little worse than normal. It was crazy. But I loved the Harry Potter ride.
So what kind of ride is that?
It's a roller coaster, but it's also 3D. And so I don't even know how to explain it. But like there's this big screen and you're strapped in. You're like,
but you're not
in.
moving the 3D, the screen.
No,
is
you're moving.
But are you just moving side to side?
No, you're going through
on a track.
You're going through a whole track.
Okay.
And so sometimes there's 3D, and then out of nowhere, this big like animatronic dragon is out of nowhere, like breathes real fire. Whoa. And then the next thing you know, you're like back playing Quidditch on this 3D thing. But like the way they have it set up is so like when you're flying on your broom and you go straight down, the ride turns and goes like straight down. I had the time of my life.
So you love that.
That was really fun.
Maybe you should open your eyes next time you go on the Hulk.
Maybe, but the Harry Potter one was really fun.
That's interesting.
I think there's something about being outside that scared me. Like there's the sky,
Well, like if you see where you could fall to, that might be like nerve-wracking. Whereas if you're like, this is all a fake land. If I fall, I will fall into that dragon.
Quidditch. Or,
yeah.
But the brain's interesting because there's this part in that Harry Potter ride where it looks like you're about to crash into a bridge, but it's like on a screen. It's fake. Right. And everyone screamed.
Oh my God,
and like
so
jerked,
funny.
Because you're like, oh my God, I'm about to hit my head. And there's like nothing to hit your head on.
That is amazing.
It's interesting.
But that's like the whole thing of like, does it really matter what you're like, if what you're experiencing is real or not? It doesn't matter because you're having the same experience, like the same reaction to it.
Okay, so any good books or TV shows?
I'm trying to think. My husband and I watch a shitload of TV because once 7:00 hits, so we put our kids to bed at like 6:30.
See, that's smart.
So we have time afterwards, and then I just like am brain dead and zone out. A good one that I liked recently was Maniac. Did you see that? It's like got like Jonas. What's his name?
I don't know.
Jonas something. I don't know. He used to be like heavy set and then he lost.
Oh, Jonah
Hill.
Yes.
I think he's in it.
Really talented.
Yeah. And so I'm hoping he's actually in it, but I think like I watched that a while ago.
Did you watch the movie? I think it was the first one he wrote and directed called 90s? Mid-90s? Something like that. And it was about being young in the 90s. It's very good.
Oh my God.
It's like kind of a little avant-garde too. I mean, not totally, but there's like a lot of stillness and like a lot of questions that you have in it. It's creative.
I'm going to look that up. I totally want to see that. Yeah, because I really like him. So Maniac was cool. It was all like a little bit sci-fi. They were like trapped in it was like they were supposedly like undergoing like psychological laboratory tests, but it was like all crazy. So yeah, and I think it's on Netflix or something.
Cool.
It's on one of those streaming. Yeah. And then I recently read a good book called The Intimacy Interviews. Did you read that? So the girl is actually from Wilmington, or she came to school in Wilmington too, and I think she's about like your age. Maybe she's somewhere between our ages. So I was like, maybe you would know her.
Yeah, what's her name? Do you know?
Yeah, Ashley Skeen.
No, I don't think I know her.
And so she wrote this book where she went across the country and interviewed different people to ask them about like their love, like any love story they wanted to share with her.
That's cool.
And it's that whole idea of like, just share, like just open up and talk about it. So she talked, there were love stories that went wrong, love stories that went right, just so much. And I found myself like crying through the whole book because every bit of it, and I've only had like 3 long-term relationships probably in my life, but I could like resonate with every bit of it. And it was like, that's a really good book to read if you.
That's what's really cool about books. It connects the human experience.
Yeah.
You know, like you get to witness someone else's life, but there's always these parts where you're like, oh yeah, I know what that feels like.
Yeah.
You know, and like I think a good writer is able to make that connection.
Exactly. And it's that same thing, like even before you're like, I don't know why I know what that feels like, but it's just like your heart opens and it like connects via your emotions before it even reaches your brain.
It's cool.
It is cool. I like that.
Okay. So anything else you want to share before we part ways?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on Dharma Drops. What a fun episode.
I'm so glad you had me. It's so fun. This is like a great way to meet you.
I know. I keep meeting all these cool people through the podcast. It's awesome. It's like a cool gift for me, you know, and hopefully for everyone else too. So guys, I say it every single time, but I always mean it. Please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to Dharma Drops on whatever app you're listening to this podcast on. And you can follow me at Rebecca Warfield Yoga on Instagram and at Dharma Drops. And don't forget, you can go to makeyourperfect.com and at Make Your Perfect on Instagram and follow Gaby. And until we meet again, bye. Bye. Musings, not truths, people. Don't forget, everything I say on this podcast is amusing. I can't really tell you if it is a truth, but I'll let you decide if it's a truth for you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Dharma Drops podcast. As I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Oh, shoot. You know what? Maybe even said that at the end of the episode. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. I'd really appreciate it if you'd rate, review, and subscribe. And I cannot thank you enough for always listening to this podcast and tuning in week after week to listen to all the crazy shit that we talk about on this podcast. In any case, have a great one. Until we meet again next time, guys. Bye.